Life had a comforting rhythm. I was a regular guy with a decent job in marketing, married to my wife Emily for over a decade. We had a beautiful home in the suburbs, the kind with perfectly manicured lawns and friendly neighbors who waved from their porches. Emily was the love of my life. We met in college, and our connection was instantaneous. She was smart, funny, and compassionate, and we shared a bond that seemed unbreakable. Together we had 2 kids, Ethan and Lily, who were the light of our lives. Our family spent weekends at the park, barbecuing in the backyard, and watching movies together on the big screen in our living room. Emily and I shared a network of friends, many of whom we had known since our university days. Among them was my best friend, Dave. Dave was a constant presence in our lives. He was the type of friend who could show up unannounced for dinner and always be welcome. We'd been through thick and thin together, and I considered him a brother. But then, subtle changes began to creep into our seemingly perfect life. Emily started working later than usual, often coming home tired and preoccupied. She'd always been diligent about her job, but this was different. Her excuses about late meetings and tight deadlines felt rehearsed, almost too polished. I shrugged it off initially, attributing it to the pressures of her demanding career in event planning. Then, one evening, I found myself alone at home with the kids. Emily had texted that she'd be working late again, and I decided to give Dave a call. We hadn't hung out in a while, and I figured some company would be nice. To my surprise, Dave didn't pick up. It wasn't like him to ignore my calls. Later that night, when Emily returned home, I noticed she seemed unusually happy, her face flushed with an energy I hadn't seen in a while. "How was your day?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Oh, the usual," she replied with a nonchalance that felt forced. "Just another busy day at the office." Something about her tone didn't sit right with me. I pushed the thought aside, chalking it up to my own overactive imagination. But as days turned into weeks, the signs became harder to ignore. Emily's phone, once left casually on the kitchen counter, was now always within her reach. She'd become secretive, her laughter at odd hours of the night as she texted under the covers making me uneasy. One Saturday afternoon, as I was mowing the lawn, our neighbor Karen waved me over. She had always been a bit nosy, but she meant well. "Hey, John," she called out. "Everything all right with Emily? I saw her at that new café downtown a few times, always with the same guy." My heart skipped a beat. "Really? Who was she with?" "Oh, I didn't recognize him," Karen said, frowning. "But they seemed close." A knot formed in my stomach. Was I being paranoid? Or was there something more to this? I decided it was time to pay closer attention. The following week, I noticed Emily had become meticulous about her appearance. She'd always been naturally beautiful, but now she spent an extra hour in front of the mirror, choosing her outfits with unusual care. When I asked her about it, she brushed it off, saying she just wanted to feel good about herself. One evening, when Emily was in the shower, I saw her phone light up on the nightstand. It was a message from Dave. My heart raced as I picked it up, my hands trembling. The message read, "Can't wait to see you again tomorrow. Last night was amazing." I felt the blood drain from my face. My mind raced, piecing together the clues that had been there all along. The late nights, the secretive behavior, the newfound attention to her appearance. All of it pointed to one devastating conclusion. Emily was having an affair. And the worst part? It was with my best friend. I put the phone down and sat on the edge of the bed, staring into space. How had I missed this? How had our life, which seemed so perfect, spiraled into such a betrayal? As I heard the shower turn off, I knew I couldn't confront her just yet. I needed more proof, more certainty before I tore our world apart. But from that moment on, I couldn't look at Emily the same way. The trust that once formed the bedrock of our relationship was now cracked, and suspicion seeped through every interaction. After that night, I felt like I was living in a fog. Each day brought new suspicions, and I couldn't shake the feeling that my world was crumbling. I had to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. I needed concrete evidence of Emily's betrayal. Only then could I confront her and decide what to do next. I started by paying closer attention to her behavior. Emily had always been an open book, but now she was guarded. Her phone was never out of sight, and she was constantly texting, her fingers flying over the screen with a familiarity that stung. I knew I had to find a way to access her messages, but I needed to be smart about it. One evening, I decided to go out for drinks with a coworker, someone Emily didn't know well. I told her I'd be back late, hoping she'd lower her guard if she thought I was occupied. Sure enough, when I returned home earlier than expected, I found her on the couch, her phone clutched in her hand. She didn't hear me come in, and as I approached quietly, I saw her texting Dave. The look on her face was one of delight, completely absorbed in her conversation. "Hey, I'm home!" I called out, making her jump. She quickly locked her phone and looked up, her smile faltering. "Oh, hi, you're back early," she said, her voice strained. "Yeah, my friend had to leave early," I replied, watching her closely. "What were you up to?" "Just catching up on some emails," she lied, her eyes not meeting mine. I nodded, my heart heavy with the weight of her deception. I needed a plan. The next morning, I told Emily I had an early meeting and left the house before she woke up. I drove to a local electronics store and bought a small GPS tracker. That evening, when Emily was in the shower, I slipped it into her car's glove compartment. I hated the idea of spying on her, but I needed to know where she was going. Over the next week, I checked the tracker's location every night. Most of the time, it was at her office or around town, but one evening, it pinged at an address I didn't recognize. I looked it up and found it was a hotel on the outskirts of the city. My stomach churned. What was she doing there? I decided to follow her the next time she went to that location. A few days later, she told me she had a late meeting and wouldn't be home until after dinner. I pretended to be understanding, but as soon as she left, I got into my car and followed the GPS signal. Sure enough, she drove straight to the hotel. I parked a few blocks away and walked to the hotel's entrance, my heart pounding in my chest. I saw Emily's car in the parking lot, and after a few minutes, I watched her and Dave emerge from the building, laughing and holding hands. They got into her car and drove off, and I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. This was it, the proof I needed. I took a few photos with my phone, my hands shaking. The images were blurry, but they clearly showed Emily and Dave together. I felt a mix of anger, sadness, and betrayal that was almost too much to bear. I couldn't believe this was happening. How could they do this to me? When I got home, I sat in the dark, trying to process everything. I knew I had to confront Emily, but I wanted to do it in a way that left no room for denial. I decided to hire a private investigator to gather more evidence. It was an extreme measure, but I needed to be sure. The investigator, a woman named Sarah, was professional and discreet. She assured me she'd get to the bottom of things and keep me updated. Over the next few weeks, she provided me with photos, videos, and detailed reports of Emily's meetings with Dave. They were careful, but not careful enough. Sarah caught them at the hotel several times, as well as at restaurants, and even at Dave's apartment. Each new piece of evidence felt like a knife to the heart, but it also steeled my resolve. I needed to confront them both, to make them face the consequences of their actions. I couldn't let this betrayal continue unchecked. I planned the confrontation carefully, choosing a time when I knew both Emily and Dave would be at the hotel. The day arrived, and I felt a mixture of dread and determination. I drove to the hotel, parked outside, and waited. My heart was racing, and my hands were clammy, but I knew I couldn't back down now. This was the moment of truth. As I watched them walk into the hotel, I felt a surge of anger. This was it. It was time to expose their lies and deceit. I followed them inside, my steps heavy with the weight of what was to come. I knew I was about to shatter our lives, but it was the only way to move forward. The truth had to come out, no matter how painful it might be. My heart was pounding as I followed Emily and Dave into the hotel. Every step felt like a march towards an inevitable disaster. But there was no turning back. I'd rehearsed this moment in my mind countless times, but now that it was here, I felt an overwhelming mixture of fear, anger, and determination. I waited until they reached their room and closed the door behind them. The hallway was empty, and the sound of my footsteps echoed as I approached their door. My hand shook as I knocked, hard and insistent. There was a pause, and then I heard movement inside. The door opened a crack, and Dave's face appeared, his expression shifting from surprise to shock. "John, what are you doing here?" he stammered. "Let me in," I demanded, my voice low and steady. "We need to talk." Dave hesitated, then opened the door wider. Emily was sitting on the edge of the bed, her face pale and her eyes wide with fear. She looked at me, and in that moment, I saw the guilt and shame she had been hiding. "John, I can explain," she began, her voice trembling. I held up my hand to stop her. "No more lies, Emily. I've seen everything. I know about you and Dave. I know about the hotel, the dinners, the meetings. I know you've been cheating on me." The silence that followed was deafening. Emily's eyes filled with tears, and she covered her face with her hands. Dave stood there, shifting uncomfortably, not knowing what to say or do. "How could you do this to me?" I asked, my voice breaking. "How could you betray me like this, with my best friend?" Emily sobbed, her shoulders shaking. "I'm sorry, John. I never meant for it to go this far. It just happened. I felt so alone, and Dave was there for me." I turned to Dave, my anger boiling over. "And you, Dave? How could you? We were like brothers. You've destroyed everything." Dave looked down, unable to meet my eyes. "I'm sorry, John. I never wanted to hurt you. It just got out of control." I felt a surge of rage, and before I knew it, my fist connected with Dave's face. He stumbled back, clutching his jaw. Emily screamed, but I didn't care. I grabbed Dave by the collar and shoved him against the wall. "You think sorry is enough?" I shouted, my face inches from his. "You've ruined my marriage, my life. Sorry doesn't even begin to cover it." I let go of him and turned to Emily. "I trusted you. We built a life together. We have children. How could you throw it all away?" Emily sobbed harder, unable to speak. I felt a mix of satisfaction and sorrow seeing her like this, knowing that her guilt and shame were eating her alive. "You need to leave," I said to Dave, my voice cold and final. "Now." Dave nodded, grabbing his things and hurrying out of the room, his face a mask of pain and regret. I turned back to Emily, who was still crying on the bed. "John, please," she begged. "We can fix this. I love you. I don't want to lose you." I shook my head, feeling a numbness settle over me. "It's too late, Emily. You've already lost me. I can't stay in a marriage built on lies and betrayal." I left the hotel room, feeling a strange sense of relief. The confrontation had been ugly and painful, but it was necessary. The truth was out, and now I could begin to heal, to move forward with my life. When I got home, I packed a bag and called a lawyer. The divorce process was going to be messy, but I was determined to get through it. For the sake of my children, for my own sanity, I had to see it through. Emily tried to call me several times, but I ignored her calls. I needed space, time to think and process everything that had happened. I stayed with a friend for a few days, avoiding Emily and Dave, avoiding the mess that my life had become. Then one evening, I received a call from Sarah, the private investigator. She had more evidence, detailed reports, and photos that would support my case in court. As we went through the evidence together, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I was not going to let Emily and Dave get away with what they had done. The next day, I filed for divorce and requested full custody of Ethan and Lily. Emily was furious, but I was resolute. I would fight for my children, for my future. I would not let this betrayal define the rest of my life. Months passed, and the legal battle was grueling. Emily fought hard, but the evidence was overwhelming. In the end, the court granted me full custody, and Emily was given limited visitation rights. It was a small victory, but it felt like a step towards reclaiming my life. As the dust settled, I focused on rebuilding. I moved to a new house, a fresh start for me and the kids. It was hard, but slowly we began to find our footing. The pain of Emily's betrayal lingered, but each day it hurt a little less. I found solace in new routines, in spending time with Ethan and Lily. We created new traditions, new memories that weren't tainted by the past. I started going to therapy, talking through my feelings and learning to let go of the anger and hurt. Life without Emily was an adjustment, but it was also a chance to rediscover myself. I threw myself into my work, taking on new projects and responsibilities. It helped to keep busy, to focus on something other than the pain. But more than anything, I focused on being there for my children. They were my anchor, my reason to keep moving forward. Ethan and Lily were resilient. They adapted to our new life, and slowly the house began to feel like home. We decorated the rooms together, filling the walls with pictures and artwork. It was our space, free from the shadows of the past. I also started reconnecting with old friends, people I had lost touch with over the years. It felt good to rekindle those relationships, to have a support system outside of the immediate chaos. I joined a local gym, taking up boxing as a way to release my pent-up anger and frustration. It was therapeutic, both physically and mentally. One evening, after a particularly intense workout, I found myself talking to a woman named Laura. She was friendly and down-to-earth, and we hit it off immediately. We started meeting up for coffee, then dinner, and before I knew it, we were dating. It was strange to open my heart again after everything that had happened, but Laura was patient and understanding. She knew about my past and she accepted it without judgment. With Laura's support, I began to heal in ways I hadn't thought possible. She showed me that it was okay to be vulnerable, to trust again. Our relationship was built on honesty and respect, and it felt like a fresh start. One Saturday afternoon, as we sat in the park watching Ethan and Lily play, Laura turned to me and said, "You've come a long way, John. I'm proud of you." I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through me. "I couldn't have done it without you," I replied, squeezing her hand. As the months turned into years, the pain of Emily's betrayal faded into a distant memory. I still had moments of sadness, but they were outweighed by the joy and fulfillment I found in my new life. I had rebuilt myself from the ground up, and I was stronger for it. Looking back, I realized that Emily's infidelity had forced me to confront parts of myself I had ignored for too long. It had pushed me to grow, to change, to become a better father and a better man. I had learned to value myself, to set boundaries, and to seek out healthy, supportive relationships. One evening, as we all sat around the dinner table, Ethan and Lily laughing and sharing stories from their day, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Life had thrown me a curveball, but I had managed to catch it and turn it into something beautiful. After dinner, as I tucked the kids into bed, Ethan looked up at me and said, "Dad, are you happy?" I smiled, brushing a stray lock of hair from his forehead. "Yes, Ethan, I am, and I'm so proud of you and Lily. You two are the best thing that ever happened to me." As I turned off the lights and closed their bedroom door, I felt a peace that had eluded me for so long. The journey had been painful, but it had also been necessary. I had found my way through the darkness, and now, standing in the light of a new beginning, I knew that I was ready for whatever came next. Life would always have its challenges, but I had learned that I was capable of facing them head-on. With my children by my side, and with Laura's love and support, I was ready to embrace the future with open arms. The past no longer held me captive. It had shaped me into the man I was meant to be, and for that, I was grateful.